name's Lynette from cleverlysimple.com, and today we're gonna make a delicious homemade Dutch apple pie. Welcome to my farmhouse. This delicious Dutch apple pie is a family favorite of ours, so we're gonna dive right in and get started. The first thing I've done is I've taken my homemade pie crust out of the freezer. If you need to make your pie crust, check out the recipe I've listed below. We're gonna be taking 6 cups of apples in this recipe. Now, before we get started, I did wanna talk about apples. You want a tart apple that bakes well. My personal favorite is Jonagold, which is very hard to find. It's very seasonal. So today I'm using Granny Smith apples. This is a tart apple that's really great for baking, and you can find it almost any time of the year. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm going to cut up all my apples and I'm going to peel them because we don't want the peel, so that I have 6 full cups to then mix with my ingredients. Now, I like to cut my apples in very small pieces, and that's because I like a fully cooked apple. Now, if you like a crispier apple, then you could cut them larger, but I personally, if I want crispy apple, I'm just gonna eat an apple. In my pies, I like to have a very tender apple bite with all that sugary, crumbly goodness. So if you're looking at my size, they're about this big, and I find that this makes the perfect size for apple pie. I'm gonna get started cutting up all these apples, and then we'll add our next ingredients. So we have cut up 6 cups of Granny Smith apples, and it's probably the most tedious part of this recipe, but totally worth it in the end. So to these apples, I'm going to add 1/2 cup of sugar. And these ingredients are going to add sweetness to the recipe, but the flour is going to help absorb a lot of the liquid that comes out of the apples. One of the complaints I hear about Dutch apple pies, or any apple pie, not this one, is that it gets soggy. The crust gets soggy. It's soupy. You take that piece of pie out and you're left with a bit of a mess. This pie holds together really well, and a big part of that is that it has the right ratio of flour to sugar. So I have added 1/2 cup of sugar, 2 tablespoons of brown sugar, which I think gives it a nice flavor. And then I'm going to add 3/4 teaspoons of ground cinnamon. And that just gives it, I don't know, I just love cinnamon. I think it adds a little bit of, you know, that fall flavor. It's kind of hard to describe what cinnamon tastes like. I am not a big nutmeg fan. Some people like to add nutmeg to their apple pies. I kind of avoid nutmeg at all costs. I don't know what it is, it's just not my favorite. So I leave it out. So we have added those ingredients to this bowl, and I'm just going to stir it until every single apple is well coated with the sugars and the flour. Again, like I mentioned, it's really important to have that good flour to sugar ratio, so that as these apples cook and they release their liquid, it's going to combine with the flour and create its own sauce, if you will. Like an apple, I don't know what the right word is, but you know what I'm saying. It's going to create that binding agent within the pie that's going to be absolutely delicious. And there's nothing better than cutting out a piece of pie and the only thing that comes out is that piece. That's how you know it's a good piece of pie. Just lost a piece of apple there. All right, so I'm gonna set this a little bit to the side. I have my pie crust here, and I do this with all my pies, is I add about a tablespoon of flour on the bottom. I do this no matter what kind of pie I am making. My grandma always did it, and it really helps keep the pie ingredients from making the crust, the bottom crust, soggy. So I just add about a tablespoon and spread it around, and then I'm going to add my apples into my pie plate. Now you will find with this that it's going to be kind of heaping, if you will, and that is okay because these apples are going to cook down. So it's one of those recipes where you kind of feel like it's overflowing a little bit, but it will be fine. So I'm just going to kind of make sure these are spread out. Kind of give it a good push down. All right, now we are ready to make our crumble topping. First thing we're gonna do to add our crumble topping is add 3/4 cup of flour, 1/4 cup of white sugar, and then 1/4 cup of brown sugar. To that, I'm also going to add, let's see, my brown sugar. Make sure when you pack your brown sugar and you don't do that to white sugar. And then I'm gonna add 1/3 cup of butter. And I'm just going to cut that in to get my crumble topping. Now, one of the things I like about this crumble topping is that it uses these basic ingredients. I'm gonna give this a little stir before we cut it in. It uses those basic ingredients so that, honestly, besides the apples, that's all I had to buy yesterday in order to make this pie, because I have the pie crust in the freezer already, which is perfect. All right, I'm gonna cut this in and then we'll be ready to add it to the top of our pie. I have my crumble topping all ready to go. And I kind of take my hands and I make sure it's almost like a, I don't know, it kind of starts to stick together. And the first bit of it I'm gonna add, and you're gonna really kind of press it into the tops of the apples. And the reason I do that is because I want it to stick, obviously. And it's going to kind of crumble on its own into the tops of the apples, which really makes this such a delicious recipe. So don't worry about handling the top of this pie. Just get that topping on there and press it down. As you can see, this apple pie has a little bit of depth to it, and that's okay. It's going to bake down. I'm gonna put it in the oven at preheated 375 degrees Fahrenheit for 25 minutes, and then I'm gonna add a pie shield. This pie shield's gonna allow the edges not to brown too much, and then I'll bake for an additional 25 minutes until it's nice and bubbly, and then it'll be done. I just took the apple pie out of the oven and it smells amazing. It is worth making a Dutch apple pie just to have that sweet apple, oh my gosh, permeate your house. That being said, here's a couple tips on how to know when your pie is done. The first tip is that you want it to be a nice golden brown. The second tip is that you want to have it bubble just a little bit. A little hard to see on a Dutch apple pie, so I kind of put it up to my ear and I can hear it bubbling. The last tip I have is you want to check the bottom. Now this one you have to be really careful. I always use gloves that are oven safe. And I kind of lift it up and I look underneath, and if it's golden brown on the bottom, I know it's perfectly baked. So I hope you enjoy this absolutely delicious all-American Dutch apple pie as much as our family has. Thanks for visiting the farmhouse. Until next time. Oh, one final thing I forgot to mention. You can store this on like a cooling rack, let it cool, and just keep it on your countertop. You do not need to refrigerate a pie until you cut in it. Once you cut into it and serve it, then you will need to refrigerate the leftovers. So just another pie tip for you. Hi, my name's Lynette, and today we're gonna be making a homemade apple pie. Hard to say. Up and then